There is a sign of the awakening that almost no one talks about. It is not something that arises, it is something that simply ceases to exist. What if I told you that you might be ascending right now, but you haven't realized it yet? Because the signs are not what you imagine. Perhaps you are waiting for spiritual awakening to come with thunder, with mystical visions, with grandiose signs that leave no doubt that you have finally evolved. But the truth is quite the opposite, and that goes against everything you've been taught. Entering the fifth dimension is not noisy. She is discreet, almost silent. And the clearest sign that you are ascending is not in what begins to happen in your life, but in what simply stops happening. Think with me. What if true evolution was not about gaining powers, but about losing fears? Not about accumulating experiences, but about releasing urgencies. Not about becoming someone extraordinary, but about finally stopping proving who you are. Most people look for signs of the fifth dimension by looking outward, synchronicities, manifestations, supernatural events. But the symptoms of the deepest spiritual ascension happen in the inner silence, in what you stop feeling, needing, carrying. It's as if life doesn't change on the outside, but you've changed so much on the inside that everything around you looks different. And the most disturbing? You don't even notice when it starts. You only notice it when you look back and think, damn, this doesn't affect me like it used to. That's when you know something has changed, and it really changed. In this text, you will discover the 7 things that simply stop when you enter the fifth spiritual dimension. These are not obvious changes, these are powerful subtleties, and if you recognize at least 3 of them in your life, it is because the awakening to the fifth dimension has already begun. You just hadn't named it yet. So take a deep breath, read carefully, and if any of these things resonate strongly within you, leave the number 5 in the comments. This is the code of those who are already feeling the change, even without knowing how to explain it. There is a moment in the journey of spiritual awakening when something changes inside, and this change is so subtle that many people don't even realize when it happens. The person simply stops feeling that old need to explain their choices, to justify their paths, to convince others that they are right. It's not that she gave up on people or became indifferent. On the contrary, it's just that something within her has finally integrated, and now there's a peace that no longer depends on outside approval. When you enter the fifth dimension, this liberation happens naturally, like someone who takes off a heavy coat that he has been carrying for years without realizing it. Think with me. How many times have you found yourself trying to prove your worth in a conversation that didn't even matter that much? That friend who questions your decisions, that family member who doesn't understand your lifestyle, that colleague who always has an opinion on what you should do. Before, each comment was like a hook hooking your attention. And there you went, entering into long explanations, arguments, defenses. But the signs of the fifth dimension begin to appear just when you realize that simply he doesn't care anymore. Not out of arrogance, but out of an internal certainty so solid that it needs no validation. It's such a deep relief that it seems strange at first, as if something is missing, but what is missing is only the weight. This is one of the first symptoms of spiritual ascension that people report, but rarely get to name. "I'm tired of explaining" is a phrase that is repeated in those who are going through this process. And you know the most interesting thing? When you stop explaining yourself, the people around you react in 2 ways. Either they naturally move away because they have nowhere else to hold on to in your life, or they start to respect you in a different, almost reverent way. High consciousness does not need to shout, it does not need to prove, it just is. And deep down, in the silence of this new way of existing, you begin to feel that something greater is moving in you. Something that may have always been there, just waiting for you to stop fighting with the world to finally show up. But there is something even deeper that changes, and it has to do with time, with the future, with what you fear so much. Anxiety about tomorrow is like background noise that many people carry around for so long that they no longer remember what it's like to live without it. It's that thought that wakes up with you. What if I can't do it? What if everything goes wrong? What if I'm making the wrong choice? But when the awakening to the fifth dimension begins to happen, something curious sets in. This fear loses strength, not overnight, but like a tide that slowly recedes. It's not that life has become perfect or that all problems have disappeared. It's just that an internal trust, almost inexplicable, begins to replace that old need to control every detail of what has not yet happened. Notice one thing. Before, you probably spent hours mentally rehearsing future scenarios, trying to predict every obstacle, every variable, every possible disaster. It was as if the mind was always 3 steps ahead, but never in the present. One of the most subtle symptoms of spiritual ascension is precisely this. Mental urgency decreases. You still plan, you still act, you still organize yourself, but without that tightness in your chest, without that silent despair. It's as if a part of you finally understands that the future doesn't need to be dominated, just found. And when that happens, you realize that you were spending an absurd amount of energy trying to hold on to something that was never in your hands. There is a simple test to know if you are entering this frequency. Do you feel less hurried than before? Less urgency to solve everything now? Because the fifth spiritual dimension does not operate in the logic of rushing. It operates in the logic of presence. And presence does not combine with anxiety. When you are really here, now, the future loses that frightening weight and becomes just another moment that is yet to come. You may begin to notice that certain worries that once consumed you now seem distant, almost silly. And in the space that this calm opens up within you, something different begins to pulsate. A feeling that deep down, everything has always been moving towards where it needed to go. There is a huge difference between those who live reacting and those who have learned to respond. And this difference is not philosophical, it is practical, visceral, felt in the body. Before the spiritual awakening, any little thing was enough to trigger a misplaced word, a crossed look, a criticism disguised as advice. It was automatic. The emotion came like a punch, and there you were, in the middle of a discussion that didn't even make sense, defending a point that wasn't even that important. But when you start to enter the fifth dimension, something changes at the root. Things just stop hitting you in the same way. Not because you've turned to stone, but because you've developed a kind of emotional sovereignty, an inner space that nothing from the outside can invade without your permission. Look how this works in practice. Someone teases you, makes an acid comment, tries to pull you into a drama. Imagine you're in the family group on WhatsApp and someone makes that passive-aggressive comment about your choices. Oh, so-and-so has already bought an apartment and you're still there. Before, you would already be typing a long answer, explaining your life, defending yourself. Now, you read, take a deep breath, and simply does not respond. Or send a neutral emoji and go on with the day. No internal explosion, no turning it over in your head for hours. In the past, you would already be inside with your heart racing, formulating sharp answers, feeling that indignation rise. Now, you feel a pause, an inner silence, as if the provocation hit an invisible wall and simply did not enter. You even listen, but you don't absorb it. This is one of the most striking signs of the fifth dimension. You realize that you have a space between the stimulus and your response, and in that space you choose, not by effort, not by forced self-control, but because its center is so stable that nothing from the outside can move it easily. Many people report this experience with an almost identical phrase. It seems that things don't affect me as they used to. Discussions, gossip, teasing, other people's dramas, all of these lose access to their core. You are still human, you continue to feel, but the intensity is different. It's as if you've stepped out of a room full of echo and into an open space where the noises disperse before hurting you. And the most curious thing is that the people around you begin to notice. They try to nudge you, pull you into old dynamics, and you just don't take the bait. Not because of superiority, but because something inside you no longer resonates with it. And when you realize that you're reacting less, you're living longer. Then you feel that heightened consciousness is not a distant concept, but a reality that has already begun to inhabit you. There is a specific pain that almost everyone knows, realizing that someone who was once close now seems distant, even though they are there. Nothing drastic happened, no ugly fight, no scandalous betrayal, but something has changed, and that something is you. When the awakening of consciousness begins to really happen, you stop forcing connections that no longer make sense. It is not coldness, it is not selfishness. It is vibrational alignment. Certain people just stop resonating with who you're becoming, and the weirdest thing is that you no longer feel that old need to hold on, to fix, to make it work at any cost. You just walk away silently, without drama, without endless explanations. The curious thing is that this distancing happens without anger, without guilt, without resentment. Before, ending a friendship or distancing yourself from someone was accompanied by an emotional storm. You mentally reviewed everything that happened, wondered if it was your fault, if you should have done it differently. But in the fifth spiritual dimension, this movement is smoother. It's almost like a leaf that comes off the tree when autumn comes, not because the tree has rejected it, but because the time for that connection has simply passed. You realize that you are okay with it. You don't need to wish harm. You don't need to boast. You don't need to prove anything. The person follows his path, you follow yours, and everything is at peace. This is one of the symptoms of spiritual ascension that scares the most at first, because it seems cruel. What do you mean I don't miss it anymore? You ask yourself. But the truth is that higher consciousness doesn't grasp. It flows. And when you stop holding those who no longer vibrate at the same frequency, you make room for those who really belong to the next chapter of your life. No hatred, no guilt, no weight, just lightness. And in that lightness, you start to feel like maybe it was never about losing people, but about gaining alignment. And when alignment happens, you realize that certain goodbyes weren't losses. They were necessary adjustments to get you where you really need to be. If there's one thing that corrodes inside, it's the feeling of being left behind. You look to the side, and it seems that everyone has already arrived somewhere. They have the house, they have the car, they have the marriage, they have a stable career. What about you, still trying to figure out the way, still assembling the pieces, still looking like he's late in a race that everyone else has already started? But one of the most liberating signs of the fifth dimension is precisely when this comparison begins to lose strength. Not because you gave up on evolving, but because you finally understood that each path has its own time. And running has never been synonymous with evolution. Sometimes running is just desperation disguised as ambition. Think with me. How many times have you felt bad because someone your age has already gotten there and you are still halfway there? How many times have you charged yourself for not being where you should be at that point in your life? This pressure is real, it is heavy, and it feeds an anxiety that never rests. But when the awakening to the fifth dimension happens, you begin to realize a simple truth. Inner time is different from outer time. You can be 30, 40, 50 years old and still be at the beginning of something important. It may be late according to the social schedule, but perfectly on time according to the schedule of your soul. And when that penny drops, the urgency disappears. Not in a lazy way, but wisely. Here's a practical test. Think about that conquest that someone close to you had and that used to leave you with that tightness in your chest, that envy disguised as admiration. Does it still bother you like before? Or can you genuinely look and feel that her path is hers and yours is yours? Because the higher consciousness does not compete, it recognizes. And when you stop comparing yourself, you stop delaying yourself. You are simply where you need to be, learning what you need to learn, at the pace that makes sense for your journey. And in that strange peace that comes from accepting your time, you begin to realize that maybe it was never about arriving fast, but about arriving in one piece. And when you allow yourself that, something inside you relaxes in a way that it hasn't in years. The human mind is noisy by nature. It doesn't stop. It stays there, dwelling on the past, projecting the future, creating scenarios, reviving conversations, anticipating problems that may never happen. It's as if there's a radio on all the time inside your head, and you're forced to listen to it, whether you want to or not. But when you begin to experience spiritual awakening in earnest, something changes in that noise. The mind is not empty. That is a myth. It does not become a still lake of perpetual meditation, but it becomes quieter. Obsessive thoughts, those that go round and round on the same subject, begin to lose strength. And in their place, a space emerges. A breather. A break that simply did not exist before. Notice one thing. Before, you woke up and your mind came with everything. Worries, mental lists, imaginary dialogues, various anxieties. It was automatic, as if the brain turned on in whirlwind mode as soon as you opened your eyes. But one of the most subtle symptoms of spiritual ascension is precisely this. You wake up and notice a different silence. It's not that he doesn't have a thought. He does. But they don't dominate you anymore. You can watch them passing, without clinging to each one, without getting into every mental loop that appears. It's as if you had come out of the storm and are now looking at it from the outside, with a certain safe distance. This change doesn't happen overnight, and many people don't even realize when it starts. But the moment comes when you notice, damn, it's been a while since I've been mulling over that. That cyclical thought that haunted you for days, weeks, months, just stopped. The fifth spiritual dimension does not empty the mind, but organizes it. It brings coherence between what you think and what you are. And when this happens, the internal noise decreases not by effort, but by alignment. You still think, you still reflect, you still process, but without that mental overload that used to make you exhausted just by existing. And in this new silence, you begin to hear things that have always been there, but that the noise did not let you notice. This is perhaps the deepest of all, the need to know if you're going in the right direction. It's that inner voice that asks endlessly, is this really it? What if I'm fooling myself? How do I know I'm not wasting time? And the craziest thing is that we look for confirmation everywhere, in videos, in books, in advice from other people, in signs from the universe, as if we needed a stamp, an official approval that said, yes, you are on the right track, you can go in peace. But when you actually step into the fifth dimension, that need for external validation simply disappears. Not because you now know everything, far from it, but because you know enough to trust. And that trust doesn't come from the outside. It's born from within, quiet and unwavering. It's a strange feeling at first, because we were conditioned to doubt, questioning, searching for evidence. But the awakening of consciousness brings a different kind of certainty, a certainty that needs no arguments, that does not depend on logic, that is not justified. It's as if something inside you has finally fallen into place, and now you just know. He knows he's where he needs to be. He knows he's doing what he needs to do, even if the whole world says otherwise, even if the results have not yet arrived, even if everything seems uncertain on the outside. Inside, there is an inexplicable peace, And this peace is one of the most powerful symptoms of spiritual ascension because it frees you from dependence on opinions, approvals, confirmations that will never be enough anyway. Think with me. When was the last time you felt that pressure of needing to be absolutely sure about everything before taking a step? That anguish of, what if I'm wrong? Does it still paralyze you like before? Or do you realize that you can walk even without having all the answers, even without knowing exactly where it will lead? Because higher consciousness does not require detailed maps, it relies on movement. And when you stop looking for confirmation out there and start feeling that inner certainty, you realize that it was never about having all the answers. It was about trusting enough to walk even without them. And at that moment, something inside you calms down in a way that words can't explain. It's just peace, peace without explanation. And maybe that's exactly where you realize you're not trying to get into the fifth dimension. You're already in it. Maybe you're expecting big signs, but the real awakening is discreet. It starts when certain things stop. So tell me something. How many of these 7 things have you noticed that have stopped happening in your life? Because if you've recognized at least 3, it's no coincidence. It is an awakening of consciousness. And now that you know this, the question that remains is, what are you going to do with this information? Will you ignore it and go back to autopilot, pretending you didn't feel the weight of those words? Or will you have the courage to look inside and recognize that you are no longer who you were, and that this is the most powerful thing that could be happening to you right now? Because there is a window that opens when you recognize these signs. And if you ignore it, it can close. Not because of punishment from the universe, but because life will take you to the next cycle, and you may miss this opportunity to anchor this awareness now. Because here's the truth that no one tells you. Higher consciousness doesn't wait for you to be ready. She's already calling you, now, right now. And if you've come this far, if you've read every word of this text without skipping, it's because some part of you already knows that it's time to stop resisting and start trusting. Stop doubting and start feeling. Stop looking for confirmation out there and finally recognize the certainty that already pulsates within you. I want to know, are you going to continue this journey, or are you going to let this feeling go? Comment below, which of these 7 things touched you the most? Which one made you pause and think, damn, this is exactly what's happening to me? And if you want to continue diving into this awakening, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell because there is much more to come. Content that will help you understand what is happening to you, navigate this transformation clearly, and finally live from this new frequency. The 5th dimension is not a distant destination. It is a state of being that you can access right now. And you've already started.